And standing by right now is James Rosen, Fox News chief Washington correspondent. He's been covering the Benghazi story. We have the big hearing scheduled for today. Good morning to you, James.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, so I want to go through the witnesses we're going to hear from, and I want you to do just a quick synopsis of what each of these people are sort of expected to say, because we've gotten some hints from the committee. Let's start with Gregory Hicks, the number 2 guy in Benghazi from the State Department.
That's right. He was the deputy chief of mission under Ambassador Stevens. Greg Hicks was one of the last people to speak to Ambassador Stevens when Stevens frantically called him in Tripoli and said, "Greg, we're under attack." Hicks will testify to his futile pleas for military intervention throughout the course of the attacks. He will also talk about how, as he has already put it to the committee in portions of an interview that was released by the committee that they did with him in April, his jaw hit the ground. Hicks's jaw hit the ground when he saw UN Ambassador Susan Rice on the 5 Sunday shows on September 16, describing this not as an incident of terrorism, but rather a spontaneous protest gone awry over a video. Hicks will testify that he personally believes that that delayed the entrance of the FBI into the Benghazi compound grounds for 3 weeks because it stood to embarrass the Libyan president, who had already called it an act of terrorism.
All right, you got this guy.
Hicks.
I'm just sorry. You got this Eric Nordstrom guy, regional security officer. What about him?
Eric Nordstrom is the return witness. He testified at the House Oversight Committee hearings, which are chaired by Republican Congressman Darrell Issa of California back in October. Nordstrom is the one of the 3 witnesses who does not consider himself a whistleblower per se. He was a regional security officer, the top security officer in the country for the State Department in the months leading up to the Benghazi attacks. He has previously testified about how he considered the Taliban, if you will, to be the people in the State Department at Foggy Bottom, the superiors there who rejected his pleas for more security before the Benghazi attacks occurred.
Then you got Mark Thompson, who was a deputy coordinator of operations for Counterterrorism Bureau in the State Department.
Right, so this is the Counterterrorism Bureau inside the State Department, one of the many bureaus in the State Department. And he will testify that he's a former Marine. He's had this job for 6 years, directing operations for the Counterterrorism Bureau at State. He will testify that on the night of 9/11, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the Undersecretary of State for Management, Patrick Kennedy, the man who oversees all of the State Department's buildings and operations around the world, in effect conspired to try to cut the Counterterrorism Bureau out of the chain of reporting and decision-making in the early hours of 9/11. We should point out that the administration denies that occurred.
All right.
It calls it 100% false, and they produced a statement from the man who ran the Counterterrorism Bureau at that time, who said that while he personally, Daniel Benjamin, was out of the country on 9/11, there was no attempt to marginalize or sideline the Bureau.
Yeah,
it figures to be a rather scorching congressional hearing as they go, Brian. You know, and Larry, how these things go. This could be a devastating, explosive hearing.
And I just want to follow up, because you yesterday at the State Department were trying to get the State Department to comment on whether or not they thought these people who are employees of the State Department were credible witnesses. James?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to play a clip. Actually,
no, I'm sorry, but you were asking that question. Yeah.
That's right. I tried to ask the State Department briefer, Patrick Ventrell, 2 days ago at the last of the State Department daily press briefings. Look, without respect to the specific testimony these men are going to offer, which had leaked out in advance, and I was one of the reporters along with my colleague at Fox News, Chad Pergram, who was able to preview the testimony of these witnesses, without specific regard to what they're going to say, can't you just say that these are credible men, that they've held impressive jobs and resumes? Hicks has served with the United States in Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen. He's got 2 master's degrees, and he's going to talk in his opening statement, Hicks will, about the commendations he's received from President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton. There has already begun a kind of a whispering campaign among senior State Department officials about the so-called axes to grind that these 2 witnesses have, supposedly due to posts each sought but did not receive. For their part, the lawyers for these 2 witnesses maintain that the State Department, as yet unnamed officials there, tried to use threats to discourage these men from testifying.
Well, and it seems to me, James Rosen, that's, you're going to see from the Democrats on the committee today 2 lines of defense. The first is sort of, I don't know, isn't it fraught with danger if they try to attack these witnesses, considering their stature and considering they're not political appointees? Based on your description, they all seem to be, career people at the State Department or in their various capacities.
Ventrell, I should point out, when I asked him that question, declined to provide any assessment as to the credibility of these two individuals. You're right, Larry. I think that going after them in some personalized way might not come off well. Everyone who talks about Greg Hicks seems to understand that he went through an extraordinary trauma and that he performed quite heroically, as his own opening statement makes clear, on the night of Benghazi. No one wants to demonize that kind of individual. I think we've already gotten a taste of how the State Department's going to play this. Last night at around 7 p.m., the department released, attributable to senior State Department officials, a 5-page sort of fact sheet with talking points that they, in our terms, in reporters' language, is known as a prebuttal. And that talks about what happened on the night of Benghazi, what happened after Benghazi, and it basically goes point by point and says, was any military told to stand down? No. And here's what the review board, concluded, and so forth. So I think you'll see a substantive response, not one directed so much at the witnesses themselves.
James Rose, it seems like there's two aspects to this story. There's always, what actually happened, and then was there a cover-up or the reaction after the fact? What did they try to do? I'm wondering, it looks like what the two lines of questioning today are going to be, number one, the security, the fact that there was reduction in security and not a response to actually provide additional security when it was asked for, and then whether, in fact, there were troops on the ground or available to help them during the attack. That's the during aspect. But then the aftermath, you've got the talking points memo, or the talking points that got altered to make it look like it was just the YouTube video. And then this accountability review board, which we're finding out more information. All of these whistleblowers, even Hillary Clinton herself, the Secretary of State, wasn't even interviewed for this accountability review board. When you hear, off-the-record conversations with Democrats on this, what are they more concerned about out of those aspects?
Well, Larry, off-the-record conversations must remain so, but I can tell you that...
You see what I tried to do there, though, James?
Yeah, no, that's what you put up with every day, Brian. I can't imagine. But, look, I will tell you that the Democrats feel that this committee is purely partisan in nature. It has gotten so in Washington, especially in the halls of the State Department and with officials there, people who are part of the current administration there, Secretary of State John Kerry and so forth, that mere mention of Benghazi is somehow considered impolite at this point, because they like to portray the investigation that was conducted by the Accountability Review Board that you mentioned, Larry, as having been comprehensive, and it's really time to move on.
James, let me get in real quick, because what about Victoria Nuland? Because it's very clear her fingerprints are all over this effort to make those talking points be altered.
Well, Fox News has done great reporting throughout Benghazi. CBS News has done some good reporting throughout Benghazi. Now the Weekly Standard has a really kind of a bombshell story in its May 13 edition by Steve Hayes, in which it quotes all of the early talking point drafts prepared by CIA and NSC and so forth. And it even has the correspondence flying back and forth in which Victoria Nuland figures. She was the State Department spokeswoman, in which they're suggesting different kinds of alterations to the talking points. It's worth reading.
Yeah. Thank you very much, James.
All right, James Rosen, you've done a great job on this. We continue to do a great job, and we love following everything you're doing over at Fox.